On one tentacle, you and I know we're made of cells. On the other tentacle, we rarely think about what it means to be a composite organism. In fact, humanity only learned of cells less than 400 years ago, when Robert Hooke first put cork under a microscope. And the idea that society is a sci-fi hive mind is sort of a laughingstock, even if humanity looks sort of like a petri dish when viewed from far enough away. On the other tentacle, humanity has produced cartoons which tell stories about our bodies under high magnification. Today, I'd like to discuss what Osmosis Jones and Hataraku Saibou suggest about what it is we actually are. Osmosis Jones is a tongue-in-cheek buddy cop movie about a white blood cell Jones and his new pill-shaped partner Drix in the city of Frank. Frank is a private organism where heinous foreign life forms must be purged. Frank's cells understand Frank's existence. He's Bill Murray. The cells even understand Frank's complicated relationship to his daughter.
Okay, Frank. This is your, conscience speaking. Now listen carefully.
Frank affects his cells, and they affect him, even by putting words in his mouth directly from the brain. Hataraku Saibou is an anime comedy drama about cells delivering bodily materials and destroying hostile invaders. These cells hardly seem to acknowledge the multicellular organism they constitute, even when their unnamed personhood directly interferes. Medication is presented as an uncontrollable calamity with no care for the hardworking cells, whereas Osmosis Jones portrays medication as more of a superhero whom the cells work alongside. The primary antagonist in Osmosis Jones is this red guy who seems evil for the sake of it.
So, what kind of sickness do you have in mind, boss?
Deadly.
He's the only member of his illness in Frank's body. He doesn't divide and spread, he just recruits from Frank's local gang. Which, I suppose, is appropriate for a virus which infects its host's cells. But Hataraku Saibou's bacteria and viruses arrive en masse instead of individually, and their biological functions are more faithfully represented through direct visual abstraction. In this and other ways, I would say Hataraku Saibou is more realistic than Osmosis Jones. Osmosis Jones features cells who are police chiefs and mayors, and cells vote in a democracy to decide Frank's lifestyle.
We need to send a letter to the mayor about washing our hands before we eat. Cells vote, man. Cells vote.
Hataraku Saibou replaces these convenient archetypes with appropriate actual cells, complete with little textbook descriptions. Hataraku Saibou has its own news organization, like Osmosis Jones, but it's utilitarian rather than political. The cells have little individual agency in the bureaucracy of the body. But Osmosis Jones still seems more realistic in certain ways. The cells look like cells. Humanoid, personified cells, sure, but Hataraku Saibou's cells are just cute anime characters. But is Osmosis Jones actually more realistic in these respects, or just more human interpretable? Let's compare a sneeze in Hataraku Saibou to a sneeze in Osmosis Jones. Frank just sneezes, which is plenty realistic from our human perspective. Hataraku Saibou puts their nasal invaders in bubbles and sneezes them into space. It's so much more abstract, yet biological abstraction is why I called Hataraku Saibou realistic in the first place. Our cells have no clue what sneezes are, so hey, maybe cells do perceive themselves as concrete entities, more comparable to cute anime characters than amorphous blobs. So let's try looking deeper. Osmosis Jones shows DNA in a few different ways. Jones himself seems to view DNA sexually, while in the hypothalamus, DNA seems almost an object of worship, which causes Frank illness when disturbed. Disturbing a person's DNA is a harsh thing to do, but why exactly is this DNA in the brain? Because, of course, it doesn't symbolize just DNA. After damaging the DNA, the bad guy hides in Frank's subconscious, alerting Jones who's watching Frank's dreams. DNA is linked both to humanity's evolutionary history and Frank's personal past. The DNA is Frank's story, and ours. The pill also has a story. Drix has a label, which says he's meant just for temporary cold relief.
Read my label.
I've known sugar pills who've cured cancer, just because they believed they could.
But Jones gives him a pep talk about sugar pills, which convinces Drix of his self-worth. Stories, placebos, DNA, and the mind are all inextricably linked. In comparison, what I've seen of Hataraku Saibou doesn't reference DNA much at all. These cells are oblivious to their underlying story. They tell stories from cell to cell, but have little understanding of the wholeness of their humanoid universe. Instead, cells sometimes read instruction manuals, which I suppose is what a cell might call their DNA, right? But Osmosis Jones and Hataraku Saibou aren't the first stories humanity has told about our bodies. Consider this fable from Aesop, paraphrased. The other body parts got tired of the stomach, who didn't seem to do anything other than claim all the food. So the other body parts stopped supporting the stomach until the whole body starved to death. The moral of Aesop's fable here doesn't literally relate to our bodies. Our bodies figured out the importance of the stomach ages ago. Aesop is warning us about rejecting aspects of humanity and members of society whose importance isn't immediately self-evident. Likewise, here's another folktale from Liberia, again paraphrased. The head could see cherries in a tree, but couldn't reach them. The arms could reach the cherries, but not see them. Together, the head and arms gathered and ate the cherries. Then they joined the body, so they could all swim across a river to a mango tree. But they weren't quite tall enough to collect mangoes, so they added the legs to their team, and the humanoid form took its modern shape. To me, this seems analogous to a eukaryote enveloping mitochondria in mutual partnership. Components of our bodies and our societies find such advantage in working together that they could hardly function apart. So, before we knew of cells, we were still writing stories about our components in all the detail we could muster. Sometimes our components know who we are. Sometimes they don't care. What are we to make of this? Let me bring up another cartoon. In Voltron, 5 people merge their own individual robots into a bigger humanoid robot. The pilots maintain their individuality, but simultaneously treat Voltron as a united entity. And Voltron isn't the only TV show like this. Plenty of cartoons feature robots made of combinations of components with personal pilots. In an esoteric sense, Osmosis Jones, Hataraku Saibou, and Ratatouille are all giant robot anime. So, are Osmosis Jones and Hataraku Saibou comparing society to the human body? Or are giant robot cartoons projecting our body's nature onto our society? Or both? I don't know, but metaphors are all we have, and I'm glad we've made some good ones. Without a conceptual model of ourselves, how can we understand ourselves? Or maybe I'm thinking about it too much? That's all I do here at Thinkster. Let me end on this note. When Frank dreams, his dreams come from the subconscious and are played in a theater. Who should be in that theater? Frank's mayor? Frank's neurons? Frank's soul? Instead, there's almost no one. Next time, I'll talk more about dreams in media, and dreams as media. If you liked this video and want to see that one, subscribe, and maybe consider supporting me on Patreon. Bye-bye!